You know that strange moment when life suddenly flips from ordinary to unbelievable? That happened to me one quiet Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my tiny studio apartment, drinking cheap instant coffee, staring at unpaid bills, and wondering how I'd survive another month. My phone buzzed, and I almost ignored it, until I saw the caller ID. It said Adams and Associates, attorneys at law. I had no reason to hear from a lawyer, but I answered anyway. Mr. Fisher, a calm voice said, "This is Robert Adams. I'm calling about your grandfather's estate." I froze. My grandfather? I hadn't spoken to him in years. Our family fell apart over my father's gambling debts, and I chose the wrong side back then, my father's. I lost touch with my grandfather, William Fisher, and honestly thought I'd never hear his name again. "I'm sorry to tell you," the lawyer continued, "your grandfather passed away last week. You're listed as his sole heir. He left you his apartment building." For a second, I thought he had the wrong person. Me? The guy living paycheck to paycheck, inheriting an apartment building? I nearly dropped my coffee. 2 days later, I stood in front of a beautiful 4-story brick building in the Riverside district. The air smelled like fresh rain and old money. The windows gleamed, the garden was tidy, and for the first time in years, I felt hopeful. Maybe my luck was finally turning around. A woman in her 50s walked toward me, holding a clipboard. Her gray blonde hair was tied back neatly. "Mr. Fisher? I'm Linda Benson, your grandfather's property manager." I shook her hand awkwardly. "Nice to meet you. I'll be honest, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know a thing about managing apartments." She gave a polite smile but looked uneasy. "We'll get through it together, but there's something important you need to know. The building has one serious problem. A tenant in apartment 4B hasn't paid rent in 30 years. I blinked. 30 years? Linda nodded. Her name's Paula Hendress. Your grandfather never let me evict her. Every time I mentioned it, he'd just say, "Paula stays," and change the subject. "Do you have any lease agreement, any record?" "None," she said. "And by my estimate, the lost rent equals more than $1 million. $1 million. My knees almost buckled. I'd been surviving on cold noodles and coffee, and some woman had been living for free in my building for 3 decades. "Where is she now?" I asked sharply. "In the penthouse. Apartment 4B. I started toward the staircase, my frustration rising with every step. The oak banister gleamed under the sunlight, the carpets smelled faintly of lemon polish. Whoever this woman was, she'd been enjoying luxury while I'd been drowning in debt. When I reached the top floor, I stopped at a polished wooden door with a brass plate P. "Hendress." I knocked hard. A calm, refined voice answered. "Just a moment." The door opened. A woman in her 70s stood there. Silver hair perfectly pinned, blue eyes behind delicate glasses, a soft cardigan, and an air of quiet dignity. "You must be Carter," she said warmly. "You look just like your grandfather did." Her voice disarmed me for a second. Then I straightened up. "Miss Hendress, I'm here about your rent situation." "I assumed you would be," she replied. "Please, come in." I hesitated but stepped inside. Her apartment was stunning, high ceilings, polished wood floors, walls lined with old books, and sunlight streaming across antique furniture. It looked like something from a magazine. "Can I offer you tea?" she asked. "No, thank you," I said quickly. "Let's get straight to the point. You've lived here rent-free for 30 years. That ends today. Either you start paying market rent, or you'll have to leave." Paula sat down gracefully in a wingback chair. "I understand how it looks," she said gently. "But before you decide, do one thing for me. Go to the basement. Find your grandfather's old ledgers. Look for my name, Paula Hendress, and read what's written there. Then come back." "Why would your name be in his ledgers?" She smiled faintly. "Because 30 years ago, your grandfather and I made an agreement. One that saved his business and your family's future. Her calm tone bothered me. She wasn't scared. She wasn't defensive. She spoke like someone who knew a secret I didn't. Still angry, I left her apartment and headed to the basement. The air down there was heavy with dust and the faint smell of old paper. Boxes were stacked to the ceiling, each labeled with years written in fading ink. I searched until I found one marked 1990 to 1995. Inside were thick leather-bound books, my grandfather's business records. I flipped open the 1993 ledger. Every line was in his neat handwriting: income, maintenance, taxes. Then on page 127, I froze. July 15, 1993, emergency loan from P. Hendris, $250,000. Interest-free. No repayment schedule. I blinked. Read it again. Then again. $250,000. No interest. No repayment. In 1993 that was a fortune. I turned the pages faster. August 3, 1993, additional loan from P. Hendris, $150,000. September 12, 1993, final loan from P. Hendris, $100,000. $500,000 in total. My mind spun. Who was this woman? And why would she lend my grandfather that much money for free? I dug deeper and found another ledger labeled Crisis Management 1993. The entries told a story of disaster. My grandfather's construction company had been collapsing. A major client defaulted, a lawsuit drained his savings, and the bank threatened foreclosure. Then, July 14, 1993, P. Hendris offers assistance. Miracle. July 20, agreement finalized. Condition: lifetime residence in apartment 4B. No rent. July 22, foreclosure averted. Business saved. I sat on the cold basement floor, staring at those words. It hit me like a punch to the chest. My grandfather hadn't been fooled by a freeloader. He'd been saved by her. A $500,000 lifeline had rescued his company. Without Paula Hendris, there would have been no building for me to inherit. In a manila folder tucked behind the books, I found copies of old legal documents and one handwritten note: Paula Hendris is not just saving my business, she's saving our future. The apartment is a small price to pay for her kindness. I will honor this for as long as I live. I sat there for a long time, the paper trembling in my hands. The dust didn't bother my eyes, it was the tears I was fighting back. Everything I owned, everything I dreamed of, existed because of a woman I was ready to evict. When I finally climbed back to the 4th floor, my anger had vanished, replaced by shame. I knocked softly this time. Paula opened the door and gave a knowing nod. "You found the ledgers," she said. "Yes," I whispered. "I had no idea." "Come in, Carter. Let's have that cup of tea now." Her apartment felt different this time, warmer somehow, or maybe it was me who'd changed. She poured the tea slowly, her hands steady. "I saved your grandfather's company," she said, "but I didn't do it for money. I did it because he was a good man. He treated people fairly when others didn't. I saw something in him I admired." I listened, humbled, as she told me how they'd met through a business contact. How she'd been a wealthy investment banker who wanted to do something meaningful. How she'd offered him the loan on one condition: this home for life. "I didn't want him to feel indebted," she said softly. "I wanted a place where I belonged. This building became my home. He became my friend." For the first time, I realized the truth. The woman I'd seen as a burden was the reason my entire life existed. I took a deep breath. "Paula, I came here ready to throw you out. I feel so ashamed." She smiled kindly. "There's nothing to be ashamed of, Carter. You didn't know. Your grandfather never wanted credit for what others did. He wanted you to learn it on your own. She looked toward the window, where the city lights flickered like stars. He believed people should earn understanding, not just inherit it. Her words sank deep. As I left that night, Paula stopped me at the door. Before you go, she said, check your grandfather's desk drawer when you get home. There's a letter waiting for you. I nodded, unsure what to expect. That evening, I found the letter exactly where she said. My grandfather's handwriting was shaky but clear. Carter, being a landlord isn't just about money. It's about people. This building gave me a second chance because someone believed in me. Remember that tenants aren't just income, they're lives. Paula Hendris saved everything we have. Honor her, and learn from her. Be better than I was. I sat there for hours, staring at his words. The guilt mixed with gratitude until I didn't know which was stronger. The next morning, I went back to see Paula, determined to thank her properly. But when I knocked, there was no answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. For a moment, my heart sank. Then I noticed a faint sound inside, the creak of floorboards, a soft voice on the phone. I was about to turn the handle when I heard her say something that froze me where I stood. Yes, I've done everything I promised William. Carter knows now. My heart skipped. She was talking about my grandfather and me. I leaned closer to the door, trying to catch every word. Yes, she continued softly, he found the ledgers. He knows what really happened. No, I didn't tell him everything yet. Some truths need time. I felt a chill crawl up my neck. What truths? What more could there be? When I knocked again, she opened the door like nothing had happened. Oh, Carter, she said with a gentle smile. I didn't hear you knock. Her calmness only made my curiosity sharper. I wanted to ask what she'd meant, but something in her eyes stopped me. There was kindness there, but also something else. A quiet sadness. I just came to thank you, I said. For everything. She nodded, but her gaze drifted toward the window again. You're welcome. Sit down, Carter. I want to tell you a little more about your grandfather. I sat, heart pounding. She poured 2 cups of tea, the steam curling through the air like whispers from the past. Your grandfather, she began, was not only a businessman. He was a man of principle. When I met him, he had nothing left but integrity. The banks were closing in, his partners had abandoned him. But even then, he refused to cheat anyone or take shortcuts. That's why I helped him. She paused, looking at her hands. But what he didn't tell you is that helping him came with a price. Not for him, for me. What do you mean? I asked. She smiled faintly. You'll understand soon enough. Before I could question her further, she changed the subject. Your grandfather wanted this building to be more than bricks and rent checks. He saw it as a shelter for people who needed a chance, just like he once did. I could tell she was avoiding something, but her words carried weight. Every sentence made me feel like I was stepping deeper into a story that wasn't finished yet. The next few days passed quietly. I started taking my new role seriously, learning about repairs, payments, tenants' needs. But one thought kept haunting me. What did Paula mean when she said she'd paid a price? One evening, as I was reviewing maintenance reports, Linda, the property manager, knocked on my office door. Mr. Fisher, she said hesitantly, I think you should see this. She handed me an old envelope she'd found while cleaning the basement. It was addressed to Paula Hendris, confidential. The seal was unbroken. Where did you find this? I asked. In your grandfather's old file cabinet, she said. It was hidden behind some tax papers. I hesitated, then decided to take it upstairs to Paula. But when I reached her door and knocked, there was no answer again. I waited a few moments, then gently pushed the envelope under her door with a note, "Found this in the basement. Thought you should have it." The next morning, I found the envelope placed neatly at my own door. A short note was attached in Paula's elegant handwriting, "Some things are better left unopened." I stood there in the hallway, staring at her words. My curiosity burned hotter. Why would she say that? Later that day, I went to visit her again. She welcomed me in with her usual warmth, but I could sense something heavy in the air. "I found the letter," I said carefully. "Yes," she said softly. "And I hope you respected my request." "I did," I lied. But the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about it. She smiled sadly. "You remind me so much of him." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she looked at me and said something that made my pulse quicken. "Carter, did your grandfather ever tell you about the woman he loved before your grandmother?" I frowned. "No. He never mentioned anyone." Paula's eyes glistened. "That's because it was complicated. Painful, even. She was a woman he could never have. Not because he didn't love her, but because life decided otherwise." She paused, then added quietly, "I was that woman." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The ticking of the old wall clock filled the silence. "You?" She nodded. "We met long before your father was born. I was a young financial advisor, ambitious and naive. He was married, honorable, and completely devoted to his family. We cared for each other, but we both knew the line we couldn't cross. When his business began to fail years later, I couldn't stand by and watch him lose everything. So I helped him, the only way I knew how." It felt like my chest tightened. The air in the room grew heavier with every word. "So you weren't just his friend," I said softly. "No," she whispered. "But I was never his lover either. We loved each other in silence, from a distance. That's why I stayed in this apartment. It wasn't just a place, it was a memory of him." I looked around the room, at the old books, the soft furniture, the photos on the wall. Every corner held pieces of her life, and, now I realized, of his too. "Your grandfather visited often after your grandmother passed," she continued. "He would bring me flowers, sometimes dinner. We never spoke about the past, but we didn't need to. The silence between us said everything." Her eyes misted. "He asked me once if I ever regretted helping him. I told him no. But I did pay a price. My reputation on Wall Street was ruined after that loan. People said I had emotional motives, that I couldn't be trusted professionally. I lost my firm, my career, everything I built. But I never regretted it, not once." I felt a lump in my throat. "You gave up your career for him?" "Yes," she said simply. "Because some things are worth more than a title or a paycheck." She looked up at me then, and her gaze held something almost motherly. "Carter, I know you're trying to find your footing in life. But promise me something. Don't let money make you forget your humanity. Your grandfather didn't. Neither should you." I nodded slowly, her words sinking deep. Over the next few weeks, I saw Paula often. We had tea, shared stories, and she told me things about my grandfather I'd never known. He'd once rebuilt a tenant's car himself when they couldn't afford a mechanic. He had paid a veterans hospital bill in secret. The man I'd barely known in life was turning into someone I deeply admired. Then one afternoon, Linda called me in a panic. "Carter, it's Paula," she said breathlessly. She collapsed in her apartment. "The ambulance is here." I raced upstairs 2 steps at a time. Paramedics were already there, carrying her on a stretcher. Her face was pale but calm, her eyes fluttering open when she saw me. "Carter," she whispered weakly, "don't worry. It's just my heart, it's been failing for a while." I took her hand. "You'll be okay. You have to be." She smiled faintly. "Promise me something, before it's too late." "Anything," I said, choking on my words. "In my desk drawer," she whispered, "there's an envelope. When I'm gone, read it. But not before." "Don't say that," I begged, but she only squeezed my hands softly before they carried her away. That night, I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt colder without her warmth. I kept hearing her voice in my mind, "not before." Days turned into a week. I visited the hospital daily, but the nurses said her condition was worsening. Then one morning, Linda called again. This time, her voice was trembling. "She's gone, Carter." The world seemed to blur. I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone slipping from my hand. Later that day, I stood in her apartment. It was silent, sunlight pouring gently across her books and teacups, like time had stopped. On her desk lay a sealed envelope with my name written in her neat cursive handwriting. I held it for a long moment, afraid to open it. Then I did. Inside was a short letter. "Carter, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I've left you the one thing that truly mattered to me, this home. Your grandfather once gave it to me as a promise, and now I give it back to you. But more than that, I leave you the lesson we both learned: real wealth is in people, not property. Take care of them, as we took care of each other." Below the letter was another folded document, her will. She had named me the beneficiary of her estate. I couldn't believe it. She'd left everything to me, her investments, savings, and even her shares in the building's management company. I sank into her chair, tears blurring my vision. This woman, who I had once seen as a burden, had turned out to be the quiet guardian of my family's fortune, my grandfather's memory, and now, my future. But as I read the last line of her letter, my hands started shaking again. It said, "If you ever want to know the full truth about your grandfather, and why I stayed in 4B even after he was gone, look in the box marked 1994, in the basement." My pulse quickened. The truth wasn't over yet. That one line from Paula's letter echoed in my head all night. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her soft smile, heard her calm voice saying, "Some truths need time." By sunrise, I couldn't wait any longer. I went down to the basement. The same familiar smell of dust, wood, and age greeted me as I opened the old metal cabinet again. My flashlight beam danced across the labels until it stopped on one box, 1994. I pulled it out, brushing away thick dust. Inside were ledgers, letters, and one small black notebook bound with a faded red ribbon. My hands shook as I untied it. The first page stopped my heart. It was my grandfather's handwriting. "Private, William and P. Hendris, Project Hope." I frowned. I'd never heard of any Project Hope. Flipping through the pages, I realized this was no ordinary business record. These were journal entries, personal thoughts my grandfather had written after the loan. January 12, 1994, Paula insists on calling this Project Hope. I still can't believe what she's doing for me. But she says this isn't about money. She says she's paying a debt to life itself. February 8, 1994, she's brilliant. Her ideas saved the company again. The bank offered me a partnership deal I never dreamed possible. I owe her more than words can express. I wish I could tell her how I truly feel, but that would ruin everything. I stopped reading, feeling a tightness in my chest. This wasn't just business. He loved her. Every word carried emotion, restraint, and pain. I kept turning pages. March 3, 1994, she says she doesn't have family. I told her she does now. She smiled but said, maybe someday you'll understand why I can't let people get too close. There were other notes, about repairs, new tenants, and financial plans, but one entry stood out. It was dated June 10, 1994 and written in shaky handwriting. Paula told me the truth today. She was diagnosed with a heart condition, congenital, incurable. She may not live to see 50. She wanted to make sure her money went somewhere meaningful. That's why she helped me. She said saving this building gave her peace. I felt my breath catch. That's why she'd stayed all these years. Not because she wanted charity. She'd wanted to live quietly, surrounded by something she helped build. As I turned the last few pages, I found one more entry dated December 31, 1994. She asked me to promise something tonight. She said if she ever passed before me, I must take care of this place like it's part of her. I told her I would. And if she goes first, I'll keep apartment 4B exactly as she left it. My eyes blurred. My hands trembled as I closed the book. I'd spent weeks thinking I'd inherited just a building. But now I understood, I had inherited their story. Their friendship. Their love. Their promise. I sat on the basement floor for what felt like hours. Finally, I whispered, I understand now, Paula. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. About how quiet her kindness had been. She'd helped everyone in that building, not because she wanted credit, but because that was who she was. The next morning, I gathered all the tenants together in the courtyard. The sun was warm, and the air felt different, lighter somehow. I wanted to share something with you all, I began. You probably know Paula from apartment 4B. What you don't know is that she was the reason this building even exists today. She saved it 30 years ago. She made it possible for all of us to have a home here. People gasped. Mrs. Perry from 2A covered her mouth. Mr. Johnson from 3B bowed his head. I've decided to dedicate the rooftop garden to her, I said. We'll call it Paula's Garden of Hope. Because that's what she gave this place, hope. The tenants clapped softly. Some cried. That night, as the sun set over the city, I stood on the rooftop, watching the lights flicker on across the skyline. For the first time, I felt like I belonged to something bigger than myself. Days passed. Then one morning, I received a call from Paula's lawyer. Mr. Fisher, he said, I wanted to inform you that Miss Hendress left another sealed package with our office, to be delivered to you 1 month after her passing. I swallowed hard. What's in it? I can't say. It's sealed. But she wanted you to open it privately. A month later, the package arrived, a small wooden box with brass edges and a key taped to the top. I sat at my desk for nearly an hour before unlocking it. Inside were 2 items, an old photograph and another letter. The photo showed my grandfather and Paula standing in front of the building's entrance, smiling at each other like the world didn't exist. He looked younger, happier than I'd ever seen him. She looked radiant. There was something unspoken between them, captured forever in that single picture. I opened the letter. Carter, by now you've probably read your grandfather's journal. You know most of the truth. But there's one more thing. When I met William, he wasn't just a man I admired, he was the reason I changed my life. Before him, I measured success in numbers. After him, I measured it in people. He showed me that kindness is a legacy no one can take away. You and I never met when you were a child, but I saw your photos. He kept them in his office. He told me you were curious, thoughtful, and full of potential. He believed you could continue what we started, to build more than just property, but purpose. That's why I left you everything. You were his pride, Carter. Even when you were far away. If you ever doubt your path, come to apartment 4B. Sit by the window at sunset. You'll understand everything. I folded the letter slowly. My throat felt tight. That evening, I went up to her apartment again. The place was just as she left it, the books, the teacup, the faint smell of lavender. I sat by the window as the orange light of sunset spilled across the city. And I swear, for a moment, I could feel her presence there. Her calm voice. Her steady warmth. I whispered, "Thank you, Paula. For everything." Weeks turned into months. I poured my heart into maintaining the building the way she and my grandfather would have wanted. I planted roses and ivy on the rooftop garden. I started small community events, just like Paula had dreamed. One day, as I was cleaning her apartment to preserve it as a small memorial, I noticed something behind a bookshelf, a loose wooden panel. I gently pried it open and found a small metal box hidden inside. Inside it was a stack of old letters bound with a faded ribbon. I recognized my grandfather's handwriting instantly. My pulse quickened again. The letters were addressed to Paula. The first one read, "I can't say these words aloud, but I need them to exist somewhere. If love is wrong when it comes too late, then I am guilty. You gave me my life back, and I'll spend the rest of my days honoring that debt. If anyone ever finds this, I hope they understand we were two people who did the right thing, even when it hurt." The next few letters were equally heartfelt. Words of gratitude, longing, and respect, never crossing the line, but always circling it. Their love was quiet, restrained, but deeper than most people ever experience. The last letter, dated 1995, said, "Paula, if I go before you, keep the apartment. It's my promise to you. If you go first, I'll keep it as you left it. Either way, it will always belong to us." I closed the letters gently and placed them back in the box. My eyes were wet, but I wasn't sad. It was beautiful, the way they'd loved without ever breaking their principles. I decided to keep the letters in her apartment, exactly where I found them. Some stories, I realized, weren't meant for the world, they were meant to stay sacred. That night, as I walked through the quiet hallways, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just the heir anymore. I was the caretaker of their legacy. Their story had changed me. And then something strange happened. While reviewing Paula's old financial records one evening, I found a bank document with my grandfather's name, and another name I didn't recognize, Margaret Fisher. At first, I thought it was my grandmother. But the date was recent, just 5 years ago. That's when I noticed the signature at the bottom. It wasn't my grandfather's. It was Paula's. Next to it, written in small letters, was the note, "Transfer for Margaret's medical care, in honor of William." My heart stopped. Margaret. My mother. I realized, with a rush of shock, that Paula had been quietly paying my mother's hospital bills for years, long after my grandfather's death, long after I'd drifted away from the family. She'd kept helping us, even when we didn't know. I pressed my hands to my face, overcome with emotion. She had cared for us like family all along. As I looked out the window that night, I thought about all the lives she'd touched, my grandfather's, mine, every tenant's. I understood then that she hadn't just left behind money or property. She'd left behind a way of living, a message. Be kind. Do good quietly. Let love guide you, even when no one sees it. But just when I thought I'd uncovered everything, fate had one more surprise waiting. A week later, Linda came to me holding a small box. "This came in the mail," she said. "It's addressed to you, from someone named Daniel Hendris." I frowned. "Hendris? Like Paula?" She nodded. "Maybe a relative?" I opened the box and found an old pocket watch and a note. The handwriting was unfamiliar but neat. "Mr. Fisher, my name is Daniel. I'm Paula's nephew. She never spoke much about her life, but she told me if I ever met you, I should give you this. It belonged to your grandfather. She said it was time it came home." Inside the pocket watch, engraved in tiny letters, were the words, "For P.H. My hope, my friend." I stared at it for a long time, feeling both loss and peace settle in my chest. Maybe the universe wanted me to know that their story didn't end with her death. It lived on, through me, through the building, through every act of kindness they'd set in motion. I looked around the quiet apartment once more, the fading sunlight painting the walls gold. And I whispered, "I'll keep your promise. Both of you." But as I closed the pocket watch, I noticed something strange behind the engraving, a small hidden latch I hadn't seen before. When I pressed it, the back of the watch popped open. Inside was a tiny folded note, yellowed with age. And the words written on it changed everything I thought I knew. My hands trembled as I unfolded the small, yellowed note hidden inside the pocket watch. The handwriting was faint but unmistakable. It was my grandfather's. Just 6 words written carefully across the tiny piece of paper: "Tell him the truth when he's ready." I stared at it for what felt like forever. Tell him the truth. What truth? Who was him? Was it my father? Or was it me? The thought sent a shiver through my chest. I sat back in Paula's old chair, staring out the window as the sunlight faded into amber shadows. The city below buzzed with life, but I felt like time had stopped inside that apartment. The air was thick with history, secrets, and something sacred. For a long time, I just held the watch, feeling its weight, listening to the soft tick that had survived decades. Finally, I turned the note over. On the back, in smaller writing, were more words, barely legible but enough to make my heart skip a beat. "If he finds this, he deserves to know everything. Paula will explain when the time comes." But Paula was gone. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, whispering, "What did you mean, Grandpa?" For days, I couldn't think about anything else. I searched through every box, every file, every corner of the basement hoping for another clue. Nothing. Until one evening, as I sat in my office flipping through an old building ledger, I noticed something I had missed before. On the inside cover of the 1995 ledger, faintly written in pencil, were the initials P.H. and below them, C letter, W.F. I immediately ran upstairs to Paula's apartment. I searched everywhere, drawers, bookshelves, under cushions, until I found a thick old book with a torn spine sitting behind the others. It was titled The Art of Kindness. Inside, tucked between the pages, was an unsealed envelope with my name. My breath caught. I sat down at her table and opened it carefully. Inside was another letter, dated 2 years before her death. "Dear Carter, if you found this, it means you were ready to know the truth your grandfather couldn't say. He was a man of integrity, but also of guilt. He believed honesty could sometimes destroy what love had built. And that's why he made me promise to wait until you were ready." I swallowed hard and kept reading. "When your father's gambling spiraled out of control, your grandfather tried to protect the family's finances. He moved assets quietly, one of which was this building. But the banks caught wind of it, and the business was almost lost. He came to me for help, not just as a friend, but because there was something else connecting us. You see, Carter, your grandfather and I were more than companions. We shared something deeper, something that never needed words. I paused, trying to process her gentle phrasing. Then came the line that hit me like lightning. William wasn't just your grandfather. He was my husband in spirit, and in secret, he was also my son's father. The room spun. I had to set the paper down. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it echoing through the quiet apartment. I picked up the letter again, hands shaking. Your father, Daniel, never knew the truth. William was married when I found out I was pregnant. We both decided to protect our families. I left the city for a time, raised my child alone, and when your grandfather's wife passed, he tried to make it right. But by then, life had moved on. I came back only to make sure he and your father were safe. I never told anyone, not even Daniel. I only told William I'd keep the secret forever. I pressed my hands against my face. Daniel? That was the name of Paula's nephew, the one who had sent me the pocket watch. My throat went dry. Paula's nephew wasn't her nephew at all. He was her son. My father's half-brother. My uncle. That meant Paula wasn't just the woman who saved our family. She was part of it. I kept reading through blurred eyes. I never meant for you to find this too soon, Carter. But if you have, I need you to understand one thing: nothing about what we did was out of shame. It was out of love and protection. William couldn't bear to break his family apart, and I couldn't stand to see him destroy himself with guilt. So I stayed in the background. I watched you grow up from a distance. When you inherited this building, I knew it was time to close the circle. You were the proof that what William and I built, through honesty, sacrifice, and compassion, had worked. You didn't inherit money, you inherited love disguised as legacy. By the time I finished reading, I could barely see through my tears. My chest ached, but not with anger, more like the ache of understanding something too big for words. I finally knew what my grandfather's note meant: tell him the truth when he's ready. He hadn't meant for me to discover a scandal. He meant for me to understand the full meaning of what love and sacrifice look like. The truth wasn't ugly. It was beautiful. Painful, yes, but beautiful. I went outside and stood under the old oak tree in the courtyard. The evening air was cool, the windows of the building glowing softly. I looked up at the penthouse balcony, Paula's old home, and whispered, I know now. I finally understand. A peace I'd never felt before washed over me. The next morning, I called Daniel, the man I now knew was my uncle. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown. He was older than me, kind eyes, and a quiet smile that reminded me instantly of Paula. We sat across from each other, unsure how to start. Finally, I said, You're Paula's son, aren't you? He nodded slowly. I am. And you're William's grandson. So I guess that makes us family. We both laughed softly, the kind of laugh that carries sadness and relief all at once. He pulled the pocket watch from his coat. She told me once that one day this would lead someone back to her truth. I guess she meant you. I nodded. She did. For hours, we talked, about her life, about our families, about the strange way fate had intertwined everything. There were tears, but also warmth. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. When I got back home, I went straight to the rooftop garden, Paula's garden of hope. The flowers were in full bloom, bright and alive. The city stretched endlessly beyond, golden under the late sun. I held the pocket watch in my palm, feeling its steady tick, and whispered, "I'll keep your promise. Both of yours." Over the next few years, the building became something more than property, it became a living tribute to them. We hosted small community dinners, helped struggling tenants, even started a scholarship fund in Paula's name for kids in the neighborhood. The city began to change, but our little corner stayed the same, a haven for people who needed a place to start over. Every evening, I'd walk up to apartment 4B. I kept it exactly as Paula left it, the books, the chair by the window, even her old tea set. Sometimes I'd sit there as the sun dipped below the skyline, the same way she used to, and I'd feel them both close. One night, Daniel joined me there. We didn't speak much. We didn't have to. We just watched the lights flicker on across the city, two branches of the same story finally reunited. After a long silence, he said quietly, "She would have been proud of you, you know." I smiled. "Maybe. But I think she'd just tell me to keep going." He chuckled. "That sounds like her." I looked down at the pocket watch resting on the table. Its ticking filled the quiet room like a heartbeat that never stopped. Time moved on, but the lessons remained. Be honest. Be kind. Keep your promises. Paula and my grandfather had both lived by those words, and now, so would I. Years later, when I passed the building on to new management, I included one final note in the official file. It said, "This building was born from love, not business. Take care of it as they did." And if you ever find yourself wondering what to do, sit by the window in 4B at sunset. The answer is always there. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I still walk past the Riverside district. The windows of my old building glow like warm lanterns in the night. I always look up at that top floor, at apartment 4B, and feel something deep in my chest, a mix of gratitude and peace. It reminds me that behind every locked door, every old story, there might be someone like Paula, someone who gave quietly, loved silently, and changed lives without needing credit. And though time keeps ticking forward, like that pocket watch in my hand, some stories never really end. They just keep echoing, through people, through places, and through the choices we make every day. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the people who've quietly shaped your life. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more incredible stories, and share it with someone who still believes in kindness. See you in the next story. Because love, real love, outlives us all. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the people who've quietly shaped your life. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more incredible stories, and share it with someone who still believes in kindness. See you in the next story.